Welcome to All Things Financial with Jack Driscoll. Each week, Jack takes on all things you thought were hard to understand about your finances and makes it fun, easy, but most of all interesting. From insurance to the best way to save your money and squeeze the most out of the dollars you put aside for your rainy day. And now, you have a friend in the money business. Here's your host, Jack Driscoll.
Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of All Things Financial. Remember, at the end of 2015, we talked about a couple different planning strategies because it was year end. And the one that I was hitting at the beginning of the year, as you'll remember, were New Year's resolutions. So now we're in the middle of January, and I thought it's a good time to see how many of those New Year's resolutions went by the wayside already. How many of you remember even what your New Year's resolutions were? And I have a little quiz for you because I have what I think is one of the most important New Year's resolutions that a lot of people can choose that almost no one really chooses or even thinks about. So think about all your New Year's resolutions, and I'll ask you a question in a minute whether this one was on your list, whether it was diet, whether it was different things on your finances. Most people say they're trying to get healthier or they're going to give up something. And I have a resolution, which is normally a combination of both, giving up something and adding something. The resolution that I propose, a lot of people consider, is the resolution of pay yourself first. Now, what that means is, and some of you are familiar with that term and some of you are not, but the term is pay yourself first because here's what happens in many people's lives. We get out of school, we get a job, we're happy we now have money. So what we do immediately is we incur an equal amount of bills to the amount of income that we have. I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's what we do. So what that means is if we got a job out of school and we're going to make $15 an hour, we're going to make $30,000 a year, whatever the number is, we're going to absorb that amount of income in the amount of bills. And we're going to build our lifestyle up to equal to the maximum amount of what we make. Because we're so happy we're now earning income. And now we can have some of the things we always wanted to have when we were in school, high school and even college, and we couldn't afford anything. So now we have a job, we can go out and do what? We can buy a car, save up money, buy a house, buy TVs and stereos and systems and computers and laptops and all these different necessities and toys that we always wanted. But what I find happening is this. We consume all of our income. And without guidance in advance of getting our first job, that trend is going to continue for generations to come. So what I have, I'll share a story with you. I was out at South Park Golf Course when I was in my teens. I believe I was still in college, I can't remember. And I was walking down, I was paired up, I went out as a single and I was paired up with three elderly gentlemen, which are probably younger than myself right now at this age, but they were three elderly gentlemen also golfing. And as I was coming down the fifth hole, I was walking ahead of them and I heard one of them say to the other, you know, I read a book and someone told me about a book and I read it and he said, had someone told me about this book when I was young, and then he pointed to me, like this young man's age, it would have changed my life. So I remember having my scorecard and I was having my pencil on my scorecard ready to write whatever this book that was he was telling his friend. And the book was, don't you want to find out what this book is? At any age. The book was The Richest Man in Babylon. I think it's by George Clason. I've seen it in the bookstore even last week. It's still there. It is a classic. So yes, I went out and bought the book. And I went out and read the book. And you know what? You need to read the book too. And you need to give it to your kids and your grandkids and your friends and your neighbors. Because it's a simple book. It's almost a one-day read. It's a paperback book. And it goes through the lessons, but the main lesson you're going to walk away from is pay yourself first. So that's why I always like people to put it on as their New Year's resolution. Here's what we're proposing with this either New Year's resolution or change. I read an article that said no matter how much a person makes, whether they graduate and become a doctor and make $250,000 or $500,000 a year, or whether we get out and have a job that earns let's say $200 a day or $100 a day, maybe I'm earning $20,000 or $30,000 a year. It doesn't matter how much we make. This long time ago article that I read is, we will consume the maximum of that income. And whether we're a doctor at $500,000 or $1 million a year, or we are earning $20,000 or $30,000 a year, we still will have no savings or any money left over at the end of the month, was the point of the article. I have found that to be true in many cases, not all cases. That brings up a 401k. That brings up some of the opportunities through work, which we implore as financial advisors you to take advantage of, because it's an automated set it and forget it program to save. But back to this point of your personal issues, when I want your New Year's resolution to include pay yourself first, here's what I tell people in high school if I get a chance to speak to high school classes. I like to bring up the issue of, if you just pretended when you get out of school, if you're making $30,000 a year, pretend like you make 10% less. And I'm back to this book, Richest Man of Babylon, and I'm back to this article. So all things mesh. And what I'm into on this lesson is, if you spent just 10% less than you earned, that would be one thing. But the lessons are this. The lessons are, if you spend and then save what's left over at the end of the month, you will never, as a rule, save anything. The rule is, and the reality is, there's not normally anything left over. So the pay yourself first concept is, I'm going to set aside the first 10% of every paycheck, everything I make, for me. And then everybody else can have all the rest. Folks, that's the pay yourself first concept. If I get to you in high school, before you have money, if you have any interest in, shouldn't we, once we get a job, have some of what we earned that's ours to keep forever? And normally in a classroom, they'll say, well, yeah, that makes sense. And I'll say, then take the first 10% of everything you make, set it aside, and live on 90% of what you make. And build your lifestyle into the 90% as if that's the 100%. So you're looking at that and you're saying, whatever I earn, I just earned 10% less. If I'm a doctor earning $1 million a year, it's $900,000. If I'm someone working for $30,000 a year, it's $27,000. Whatever it is, I get the first 10% for me to keep forever. That's the pay yourself first. So when I go to New Year's resolutions, I bet most people listening and watching on TV have never made this as one of your New Year's resolutions. My New Year's resolution is, I'm going to pay myself first. And you have to pay yourself first because there's no money left at the end of the month. If you do pay yourself first and you come first, then maybe some of those bills don't get incurred by the end of the month because you're out of money. But it's not you that's sacrificing now. Folks, I've shared in this to the high school kids, and I share this with you because it's January and I'm still talking about New Year's resolutions before it's too late. this concept, the younger you are, the stronger it is. But somebody who's 50 years old, it's still a strong concept. That someone who's 20 years old, it can be an even stronger concept. They're earning much less, but time. So what do you do with the 10% you set aside? You, at that age, you hire a certified financial planner. That's what you do. And you interview people and you find someone that will help guide you through these types of decisions that will help you make better personal and financial decisions for all of your life. And then you say, I have the pay yourself first concept, and I need help with implementing that as a life plan. And here are my goals for life that I'd like to accomplish. And I know that I need to do certain steps and activities to reach those goals. And folks, listen, we do that financial planning at age 65, 85, 25, and so should you. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk to you about today, was that concept. Now, second concept I wanted to talk to you about, a lot of people talk about this one in financial planning in December, but I like to talk about it more in January, and it's the concept of charitable giving. You know, I talk about this because we're at the point in any year when we get to January, we start looking forward to the next year, but we're also looking at, it's tax time again. And tax time to me means, okay, what can I do to reduce or minimize my taxes, be more tax efficient? And in this year, it's already January. Last year's closed out. There's nothing we can do anymore about last year's taxes, right? Because everything's done. It's finished. The year is over. All the 1099s, everything's coming out already. Whether you donated to charities back then, by the end of the year, it'll count. Anything after the end of the year, it won't. But there are some exceptions where you could take advantage of last year's tax saving opportunities, even though it's this next year. One of those, as some of you might guess, are contributions to Roth or traditional IRAs. You could still make contributions to IRAs up to April of this year and still have an impact on last year's tax return. How's that done? You make a contribution in a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA. Well, there's a big difference for last year's tax return, because if you make a contribution to a Roth IRA, there is no income tax deduction. If you make a contribution to a traditional IRA, there is a possible income tax deduction. So let's say you contribute $5,000, for example, to a traditional IRA this March. That $5,000, if you're in a 15% income tax bracket, if your accountant tells you that, is worth maybe $750 back on your income taxes. And it's a income reduction of $5,000 on last year's income. So you've reduced last year's taxable income by $5,000. That might help. Even somebody that's 60 years old or 65 years old, if you still have earned income, because you can only contribute to an IRA up to the extent of what you have earned income. Our rental income, is rental income on investment properties earned income? Typically no. Sometimes yes, but typically no, depending on whether you're an active investor or a passive investor. Are any earnings from your stocks, bonds, and portfolios earned income? You think, well, hey, I chose them, I've earned that income. No, typically that is passive income. Earned income is from a job. So when we look at earned income, we mean self-employment income or W-2 income typically. And then if you have earned income, you're normally eligible to contribute to an IRA. Not always, there are income tests and limitations, but for most of us we are. Making that deduction up through April of this year can still impact last year. Well, let's get back to this charitable planning. We cannot typically go back and correct our taxes or adjust our taxes for last year to charitable planning. But the reason I like to bring it up in January is we're not rushing. We're not rushing like maybe in January we were. Hurry up and make a charitable donation for a tax write-off. What we're looking at is more sophisticated planning now in January. We're looking for, do we have charities we want to benefit? Do we have an estate plan we're trying to accomplish? Are we trying to be efficient in establishing a legacy? Are we looking at our future plans, and we're in retirement now, let's say, where certain of our assets, it's become apparent, we'll never possibly need. And I caution with a caveat on that, wait a minute, be careful if you go into a nursing home. You may not need those assets now, but watch out for if the other shoe drops or you slip on a banana peel, things go wrong. Don't assume necessarily you won't need assets just because you project you won't. But that aside, it is very likely, in many people's cases, you will not need all of the assets and resources if you have successfully accumulated money for retirement and in your retirement. There are some assets you may not need. So while you're drawing income, we as financial planners look at the sources of your assets and sometimes say, are we better to draw income from the IRA or the non-IRA? Or if we have to take required minimum distributions now that we're 70 and a half from the IRA, are we better off not taking from our non-IRA money? Are we better off, get this, taking the required minimum distribution, but instead of donating to a charity, our other assets and taking the charitable deduction write-off, are we better off using the required minimum distribution and gifting that directly to a charity? Oh my, that's something that a lot of you have never heard. There's a tax provision in the code that keeps coming and going and coming and going. So we have to always, it's a fluid tax strategy, but we've had it for a couple years preserved that for those people that are over 70 and a half, you can make a contribution directly from an IRA or qualified IRA to a charity. Okay, we need to think about this. Is it better to take the RMD as we normally would, which means we're paying taxes on it? Or is it better for us to take what was supposed to come to us, the calculated required minimum distribution, which is still required to come out of the IRA, and gift that directly to a charity? Typically up to $100,000 a year, we've been able to do that. Make charitable donations directly to a charity. So it doesn't have to be limited to the required minimum distribution. So in estate planning, we might say, let's start shifting some of these qualified taxable assets that we can't shelter taxes, even for our heirs, our children are going to have to pay taxes. Why don't we, some people would say, shift those assets, IRAs, assets, which are taxable and estate taxable if you're subject to the estate tax, directly to the charity, making a charitable contribution? Well, here's what you get. Any asset or income you shift to a charity, when they sell those assets, if they're getting the assets directly, not you taking them as an RMD, paying the taxes and then gifting them the money, but gifting them that portion of the IRA asset directly, the charities, if it's a qualified charity, gets to sell the assets. Charities don't pay income taxes. They don't pay estate taxes either. So you're gifting a taxable asset. Wow. Does that open a Pandora's box on planning? You mean we can gift taxable assets to charities and let them sell the assets? Yes. Well, now that opens up a whole nother door, because if I'm normally doing a donation in December at the end of the year for a tax deduction, I'm normally gifting from an asset that's already mine, which means I already paid taxes to get the money. So I have pre-tax assets, and I gift those pre-tax assets. I'm in a 15% bracket. I'm in a 20% bracket. They're in a 0% bracket. So I may have reduced my income by not taking that income and by gifting it as a donation. Here's the twist. When I gift an IRA asset directly to a charity, I donate that. I don't get a charitable donation on my income tax return, but I do have a benefit of not declaring that income as income to begin with. Do the math, folks. I'm sometimes better off not receiving the income and not having to pay the tax, which means I've earned a less overall income on all my other assets, than I am making a charitable donation, having to itemize my returns and get the tax write-off on the donation, which is typically a smaller benefit. So you don't get back all that you would have received prior to the tax. So sometimes it's better to gift the IRA asset directly to the charity. Sometimes it's not. So get to the tax advisors and get sophisticated planning on this. It can help you maximize the assets that you have. Another strategy is and I've talked about this on prior shows, gifting assets that have accumulated over the years. They're called appreciable assets, and that might be stocks or stocks and bonds that have appreciated in value to the point where there'd be a large potential capital gain tax to be paid if we sold those assets. But if you gift the actual stocks to the charity then sells those stocks and keeps all the money. If we have the stocks and sell them, we might be subject to the 15% capital gains or 20% capital gains tax, things like that. So there are tax strategies on charitable giving. There are tax strategies on where to draw your income from in retirement. Is it smarter to gift the IRAs to your kids by beneficiary designations and draw down your taxable assets, your capital gains at the 15%? These are different strategies. So we do income planning in retirement to try to have tax-efficient income so that your heirs and your charities are receiving the proper assets where they can gain the major benefit and you can have the maximum impact on how you receive income by which assets you're drawing income from. And also, after you pass away, if your spouse needs income, which assets are best to retain for the spouse to be able to draw the supplement income they'll now need, now that she's down to one income. Those are tax planning strategies. So I wanted to talk to you about all that at the beginning of the year. Folks, we're out of time. I want to thank you for tuning in to another edition of All Things Financial. We'll be back again next week.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Inc., member FINRA SIPC, and registered investment advisor. Insurance services offered through Driscoll Insurance and Financial Services Inc., which is not affiliated with SagePoint Financial Inc.